1997 was a hard year for the Taliban. The militia's attempt to capture the northern Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif in May had failed miserably. The Uzbek warlord Abdul Malik, who had defected from Datsun to join the Taliban, swiftly defected again to Ahmad Shah Massoud just as the Taliban was taking control over the city. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Taliban troops were massacred by Abdul Malik's forces. In 1997, Taliban also experienced major setbacks on the front line north of Kabul. During the Mazar-e-Sharif debacle, Massoud attacked Taliban positions, recaptured the strategically important town of Jalal-e-Siraj, and pushed the front line some 50 kilometers further south. It was in the aftermath of these events that an Arab commander in the Kabul front reported back to the al-Qaeda leadership in Kandahar. Retreating from the two fronts has greatly shaken up the situation in those places. In Bagram, it has become every man for himself. And in Murad Beg, the brothers had split up into three groups. May God keep them so they can regroup and establish sentry duties. The letter, which is dated August 17, 1997, is the first clear indication that al-Qaeda had started to give direct military support to the Taliban. The letter details the monthly budget for the front, which includes salaries for a bulldozer operator, 2 truck drivers, 2 pickup drivers, 2 cooks, and 2 security guards. The existence of a budget indicated that al-Qaeda at the time was financing and supporting an Arab unit that was fighting for the Taliban south of Bagram. Other internal documents from the point in the same direction. At one point, probably in 1997, bin Laden even sent his personal car to be used by the Arabs on the front. Al-Qaeda's budget at the time was moderate. The Arabs who served at the front line had a modest arsenal of military equipment. An inventory list probably written in 1998 shows that the Arabs owned a number of personal weapons like Kalashnikovs and a few squad weapons like heavy machine guns, mortars, and anti-aircraft guns. They also owned a few radios and binoculars. However, there was scant indication that the Arabs owned Stingers or other prestigious weaponry. The Arabs in 1997 had, in fact, no weapons that differed drastically from the Taliban's arsenal made up of Soviet and Chinese leftovers from the Afghan-Soviet War. And although some of the Arabs were trained on heavy weapons like tanks and artillery, they owned few such weapons themselves and frequently had to borrow those from the Taliban. The Arabs who served at the front line received orders and support from the al-Qaeda leadership in Kandahar. Not only did al-Qaeda provide financial support to the fighters, high-ranking al-Qaeda leaders were directly involved in operational planning and decision-making. This is evident from the many reports sent from the front line to Abu Hafs al-Masri, chief of the al-Qaeda military committee. The reports detail operations, personal situation, and future battle plans. Several of these reports were written by Abd al-Hadi al-Iraqi, who was president of the Kabul front line from mid-1997. In October 1998, he was promoted to be the general commander of the front line, a position he held until the collapse of the Taliban regime in late 2001. Al-Qaeda appears to have prioritized sending fighters to the front line. The Arabs who served on the Taliban's front line between 97 and 98 included several second-tier al-Qaeda leaders. That is, Arabs who became members of al-Qaeda in 1988-1992 and who served as trainers for frontline commanders in the early period. They include Abu Atta al-Sharqi, Abu Ziyad al-Mosuli, Abd al-Salim al-Handrani, Abu Tamim, and Abu al-Hassan al-Masri. Abu Atta and Abu Tamim stayed in Jihad Wall during the Civil War, while the others went to Somalia and Sudan with the rest of the al-Qaeda leadership. Several of them served in the East Africa Training Mission, a team of al-Qaeda trainers who was sent to Ogaden in Somalia to establish a training camp for local Islamist guerrillas. Others who were given leading roles in the front in 97-98 appear to have been independent jihadists who did not join al-Qaeda until after bin Laden returned to Afghanistan in May 1996. Some of them were veterans from the war in Bosnia. Allegedly, Khalid al-Midar and Wapa Hazmi also came from this conflict in Bosnia, whereas others had stayed in Afghanistan during the Afghan Civil War. Abd al-Hadi al-Iraqi belonged in this category. It is striking that a number of frontline positions were occupied by second-tier al-Qaeda members. It suggests that frontline fighting with the Taliban was an al-Qaeda next military project after the training mission in Somalia had ended. What were al-Qaeda's motivations for getting involved on the Taliban's front? Initially, the motivation was in line with al-Qaeda's general philosophy of supporting other Islamist guerrillas. Bin Laden met Mullah Omar for the first time in March of 1997. During the meeting, he offered assistance to the Taliban in the form of infrastructure projects. He also offered to put all his resources to the Taliban's disposal to help them in the war against the Afghans and Massoud and the Northern Alliance. Al-Qaeda's establishment of fighting units in the Kabul front in subsequent months may have been a direct result of this meeting. Indeed, in mid-1997, the newspapers reported that bin Laden sent a group of Arab fighters to the front line north of Kabul to strengthen the Taliban. As we have seen, Al-Qaeda's participation on the Taliban's front in 1997 was not an isolated incident. It may have been inspired by the simultaneous commitment of the coast-based militants, such as Jalaluddin Haqqani, to whom they had historical ties. But there were also other fundamental reasons that bin Laden offered fighters to the Taliban. On August 17, 1997, an al-Qaeda commander at the front reported back to Abu Hafs al-Masri, quote, God willing, the program that we have instituted will encourage the Afghans to work and to advance forward. It will hopefully raise their morale, end quote. Al-Qaeda's support to the Taliban in the hopes it would raise their morale resembles bin Laden's original rationale for establishing the al-Masada camp and subsequently Al-Qaeda in the late 1980s. Al-Qaeda was supposed to be an elite Muslim fighting unit that would be an example and an inspiration to other Muslim guerrillas. It is likely that Al-Qaeda members still viewed themselves this way, and was part of their motivation for joining the Taliban's front line. The Arabs on the Kabul front line tried indeed to lead by example, at least according to their own internal reporting. For example, during a Taliban retreat in 1999, the Arabs stayed behind to ambush Massoud's forces, hoping it would encourage the Taliban back on the front in the offensive. Quote, yet, after that ambush, I did not see a group of Taliban that was willing to fight first, recalled Abd al-Hadi, end quote. The Taliban's lack of fighting will was a recurrent topic in Arab reports from the front. Al-Qaeda had also used the front line for instrumental purposes. The front line served as a training and vetting ground for potential Al-Qaeda members and was used to strengthening Al-Qaeda's own organization. The dual rationale of supporting Islamist guerrillas and strengthening Al-Qaeda's own organization is best expressed in a letter from Abd al-Hadi on November 26, 1998. Abd al-Hadi asks Abu Hafs al-Masri to confirm the role of the Arabs on the Kabul front line. Quote, because as far as I know, so far the tasks are, 1. Participate with the Taliban in the defense of Kabul and the defense of the holy matters of Islam and the Muslims. 2. An open door to train the brethren who are new and to check their credibility and their preparedness, end quote. Over time, and especially after Al-Qaeda started to expand their organization in 2000, 2001, frontline service became integrated in Al-Qaeda's training curriculum. By 2001, Al-Qaeda's recruitment policy specified that new recruits who wanted to join Al-Qaeda had to first complete 2-month frontline service with the Taliban. However, when Al-Qaeda first joined the Taliban's front lines in mid-1997, Al-Qaeda had not yet started offering organized training courses for the new recruits. It seems, therefore, that their reasonings in the beginning were mainly idealistic. Questioning of whether Al-Qaeda's motivation for fighting with the Taliban were altruistic or self-serving is essentially obsolete. The two goals are not mutually exclusive, and for the Arabs, it was a win-win situation. Frontline participation helped recruit and educate new cadre for Al-Qaeda, which made the organization more resilient over time. Frontline participation was also meaningful in its own right, as it resonated with the very ideas on which Al-Qaeda was founded. But what was Al-Qaeda's actual contribution to the Taliban's war to begin with?